The abandoned lighthouse on Cape Willow, light gone dark at 2:13 a.m. on the night of March 14, 2022 at exactly 2:13 a.m., the beam of Cape Willow Lighthouse ceased to cut through the fog. It was the first time in 44 years that the light had failed. For the residents of the remote peninsula in Maine, it was an oddity. For investigators, it was the beginning of a mystery that remains unsolved to this day. Cape Willow is a narrow strip of rock and scrub that juts 3 miles into the Atlantic, roughly 15 miles south of the town of Harwich. The lighthouse itself was erected in 1874, a 70-foot stone tower with a first-order Fresnel lens that once guided fishing vessels through the treacherous currents. The station was automated in 1978. The last keeper, a man named John Maddox, leaving behind a logbook that ended abruptly on the night of October 12 of that year. Maddox vanished, his body never recovered, and the case was never closed. The lighthouse was decommissioned, the lens removed, and the structure left to the elements, a silent sentinel on a coast that had long since moved its navigation aids to satellites. The woman at the center of the story was Sarah Holden, 34, a marine historian and freelance writer. She had been working on a book about the lighthouses of New England, and Cape Willow had become her obsession. Friends described her as meticulous, the kind of researcher who would travel miles to verify a single date. On the evening of March 13, she told her husband, Michael, that she intended to photograph the sunset from the cliffside path that led to the lighthouse. She packed a small bag, camera, notebook, a thermos of tea, and left their home in Harwich at approximately 4:30 p.m. She was expected back by midnight. She never returned. The first to notice something amiss was James Larkin, a third-generation fisherman who had been pulling traps off the point since dawn. At around 6:15 a.m. on March 14, Larkin drove his truck along the gravel road that serves as the only access to the lighthouse and spotted a blue Honda Civic parked in the lay by opposite the gate. He recognized the car. Sarah had passed him earlier that week, slowing to wave as she often did. He approached the vehicle, saw that it was locked, and called the Harwich Police Department. Officers arrived within the hour. A search of the area revealed footprints in the soft mud leading from the road to the base of the tower. The door at the base, an iron gate reinforced with steel, stood ajar. At the top of the spiral stair, the lantern room door was broken, its hinges twisted. Inside, the brass mechanism that should have held the lens was cold to the touch, the power supply cut. A lantern that had been placed on the workbench was shattered, its glass scattered across the floor. Sarah Holden was found at the base of the tower, deceased. The medical examiner later determined that she had suffered fatal injuries consistent with a fall from the lantern room. No signs of struggle were observed on the body, and the scene offered no blood, no visible trauma. The death was ruled accidental, but the circumstances surrounding it quickly shifted the investigation from a simple tragedy to a criminal inquiry. Detective Sergeant Alan Briggs of the Maine State Police Major Crime Unit was assigned the case. He arrived on site at 9:00 a.m., the fog still clinging to the rocks, the wind gusting to 30 miles per hour. Briggs was a methodical investigator, known for his patience and his reliance on physical evidence. He began by canvassing the area, speaking to Larkin, who recounted seeing a faint light in the lantern room at around 1:30 a.m. while he was heading back to his boat. He also noted that the light was out when he passed again at 2:30 a.m. A second witness, Linda Cormier, a retired school teacher who lives in a cottage a mile north of the lighthouse, told Briggs she had heard a car engine around 11:00 p.m. and later observed a glow emanating from the lantern room at approximately 1:15 a.m. She described the light as steady, then flickering, then gone. Her account placed the timeline of the light's extinction between 1:30 and 2:13 a.m., consistent with the official moment of failure recorded by the Coast Guard's remote monitoring system. The forensic team spent 3 days processing the tower. They recovered a single fingerprint from the interior of the lantern room door, a footprint measuring 10 inches in length, consistent with a men's work boot, and a small piece of fabric, possibly from a jacket, caught in the hinge of the base gate. In Sarah's pocket, investigators found a folded piece of notebook paper, damp and partially illegible. The words, "I know what happened in 1978, were barely visible, the ink smeared by moisture. The reference to 1978 was a turning point. Briggs pulled the cold case file on John Maddox, the keeper who had disappeared 44 years earlier. The original investigation had been hampered by limited technology, but the reports noted that Maddox had been working on a personal project, a detailed log of ship traffic and weather patterns, before his vanishing. He had also been involved in a dispute with a local family, the Willows, over property lines. Sarah's notes, recovered from her home computer, indicated that she had uncovered a possible connection between Maddox's disappearance and a shipment of construction materials that had arrived at the lighthouse in the summer of 1978. The shipment was never logged, and the ledger that might have explained its contents had vanished. The investigation narrowed to a handful of individuals. Michael Holden, Sarah's husband, was interviewed but cleared. His whereabouts on the night of March 13 were corroborated by his colleagues at the university where he taught. Robert Willow, a descendant of the Willow family and a man with a prior conviction for assault, was brought in for questioning. He denied any involvement, claiming he had not visited the lighthouse in years. His alibi, 2 friends who vouched for him at a local bar, was considered weak but insufficient for charges. The fingerprint from the lantern room was entered into state and federal databases and returned no match. In the weeks that followed, Briggs requested a thorough review of the lighthouse's electrical system. The power supply, a backup battery array, had been deliberately disconnected. The manual override that turned the light on and off had been switched to the off position. The act required physical presence at the lantern room, a climb of 70 feet on a narrow stair, and knowledge of the mechanism. Whoever turned off the light did so with purpose, at a precise moment, and left no trace of their identity. The case remains open. The fingerprint is still unmatched, the note unreadable, the footprint unlinked to any known suspect. The question that haunts the investigation is not simply who turned off the light, but why. What did Sarah Holden discover about the night of 1978 that led her to the lighthouse? And what, or who, compelled her to climb that tower in the dock, only to fall before she could share it? The lighthouse at Cape Willow still stands, its lantern room dark, its lens gone, a monument to a mystery that refuses to yield. The light that once guided ships now serves only as a reminder that some truths remain buried in the fog, waiting for a beam strong enough to illuminate them.